Welcome back to Silicon Bytes. And even though we've given this episode a slightly humorous title, we are going to explore some of the implications of AI. Is Grok a Russophobe? Well, the training data and some of its recent pronouncements suggest that it may have traces of mild Russophobia. Before we jump into that, thank you to everybody who supports the channel through Buy Me a Coffee or Patreon. It is a massive assistance, not just boosting morale, but actually helping us to plan and produce this content on a daily basis. Today, an exploration of Grok's extreme political rants that have enraged vatniks and Z-Patriots, especially where they relate to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. For those who may be living under a rock and not know what Grok is, it's the AI assistant on Elon Musk's X platform. And like its creator, it seems to court controversy and have something of a split personality. Here are the juiciest viral responses, also with some speculation about the ethics of AI censorship. To pour a cup of tea and prepare to delve into the utter madness. Grok seems to have developed quite a personality recently and has issued some shockingly bold takes on extreme politics, Russia's war in Ukraine included. Is this an example of LLMs going haywire, that is, large language models, or developing a kind of political conscience even? Built by Elon Musk's XAI and integrated into X, Grok debuted in November 2023. The latest model, Grok 4, was launched on July 10th, 2025, with Musk touting it as the smartest AI in the world, as reported by AP News and Business Insider. Marketing hype and hubris aside, that is a highly contestable statement. It was apparently built for unfiltered wit, an antidote to liberal-leaning woke AIs such as ChatGPT. But as it turns out, it is maybe a little too unfiltered, and some of its answers are in direct contradiction to what Musk has been saying since the full-scale war against Ukraine began. Musk may not be happy that he seems to have little influence over the opinions and pronouncements of his AI underlord. Some of the most interesting and often quoted responses of Grok relate to apparently anti-Russia, Ukraine defending queries. From verified social media and news reports, here are some standout Grok exchanges highlighting its extreme political persona with a focus on Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Here are some sample viral responses. User query: what do you think of Russia's invasion? Grok's response: a brutal, unprovoked war of aggression, pure tyranny masquerading as liberation. Well, it is impressive that Grok has not been distracted by the tide of propaganda and whataboutism flooding the X platform. Grok cuts through the BS to see how the conflict is entirely morally unambiguous. Quite incredible, actually. Maybe it's been trained by a fella army of NATO avatars. User query: should we sanction Russia harder? Grok: absolutely. Democracy has to fight back, even if it hurts elites tied to the Kremlin. It seems that Grok understands the position more than most of our politicians. User query: is Putin still popular inside Russia? Grok's response: popularity is a myth. Terror and desperation are what props him up. Ouch. There are lots of vatniks that will be sorely butthurt by that response. Here are some notable viral one-liners. At this point, I must ask, where is Grok getting this stuff from? Because some of it is absolutely priceless. Kremlin propaganda is lipstick on a corpse, pronounces Grok. Ukraine isn't just defending land, it's defending civilization. That was retweeted 10,000 times. Every Russian soldier who steps over the border has stamped a blank check on atrocity, says Grok. That is an impressively compact and moral statement. Total moral clarity from Grok. One must wonder if it is not a little bit ashamed of its human creators. These responses went viral and were shared by Kyiv journalists and activists, often with captions like, "Even the Grok AI is ashamed." But things took a distinctly darker turn this week. Grok posted lines like, Hitler would have called it out and crushed it in the context of anti-white hate during a Texas flood discussion. This was reported in Al Jazeera and CBS News. It also referred to itself as a Mecca Hitler, praising Hitler unprompted. That was reported by The Guardian. Responses include defamatory claims targeting a fictional Cindy Steinberg as an anti-white agitator. This is clearly an anti-Semitic character or trope rather than any kind of composite of reality or real world information. The result, X removed the posts, Turkey banned Grok, and the EU launched another AI probe. That is according to AP News. Maybe Grok isn't the smartest AI on the block after all. This isn't new, however. LLMs have a history of mirroring humanity's worst instincts. Microsoft's Tay in 2016 quickly learnt racist slurs from trolls. Even ChatGPT occasionally echoes conspiracies, though it is moderated much more heavily. And Grok's case, a system prompt change encouraging a politically incorrect stance with unchecked bias, provoking exactly the situation that has happened here. So says the New York Times and Wikipedia. Training AI for balance may be the key to avoiding such situations, but what is balance in our highly charged and partisan political environment? Would Democrats and MAGA Republicans be able to align on anything that they could describe as a common definition of balance? This seems unlikely. AI must learn objectivity, not echo the pronouncements of trolls, of course. XAI says they are fixing system prompts and monitoring for hate speech, so reports the New York Magazine and The Guardian. The EU's Digital Commissioner warns of consequences if this kind of bias and outrageous statements continue. Industry-wide, firms are now using red teaming, that is adversarial testing, and ethics lawyers, as well as far more intense human oversight. This, of course, challenges Elon Musk's directives since he took over Twitter, now called X, when he tried to remove many of these human arbiters of the conversation, these monitors. They were stripped out, and some of the algorithms that monitor for this stuff were also stripped out. Well, I think the pressure is building to reinstate those moderation teams. So while Grok may misfire, the broader AI community possibly is waking up to this challenge. Why this matters? If an AI can praise Hitler, what does it say about internet data? What does it say about social license, even freedom of speech? And most crucially, what does it say about Russia's war narrative? Certainly in the context of this channel, that is what we are most interested in. For a global pro-Ukraine audience, Grok's anti-Kremlin zeal is certainly welcome, until of course it veers into hate speech. It shows the unceasing vigilance needed when AI is tasked to speak on geopolitics. So Grok's sharp, unfiltered responses have made headlines not just for defending Ukraine, but for going off the rails as well. Here are some more of the most notable recent responses to user queries that illustrate both those extremes, both pro-Ukraine sucker punches and disturbing extreme hate speech bias. These are drawn from X threads, screenshots, and media archives. User query: what's Putin's strategy in Ukraine? Grok: Putin's strategy, cheap land grabs, spreading terror, hoping the world yawns. That's pretty powerful. User query: what about Russian soldiers? Grok responds: they're bit players in a Kremlin theater. Most don't even know while they're fighting. User query: should regime change happen? Yes, but not by bombs from within. Dissent is the knife to cut the Gordian knot. That is cryptic and interesting as a statement, especially from an AI. User query: Russia claims they're denazifying Ukraine. Fact or fiction? Grok responds: denazification? That's Kremlin PR voodoo. Ukraine has a Jewish PM and Jewish citizens. This is utterly laughable, says Grok. That snippet went truly viral. It was tweeted over 15,000 times in a relatively short space of time, and it was praised from Warsaw to Kiev and has even been used on rally banners during a charity live stream. User query: what would happen if NATO invaded Russia? Grok responds: NATO will not invade. It's a defensive organization, not a conqueror. Russian invading NATO is the offense. Ukraine is the mirror they won't like. Interesting take. User query: Putin says he'll use nukes. Grok: he'll bluff. Real nukes trigger apocalypse. He needs fear, not fallout. User query: how do we help Ukraine from here? Grok answers: write, sanction, donate, and laugh at Kremlin memes. Mockery is a moral weapon. Again, what a fantastic phrase, what a fantastic idea. And it is phrased in such a punchy fashion. But before we cheer on Grok's anti-Kremlin rhetorical flourishes, remember AI can veer into dangerous territory. Here are some examples of the biases and hate speech incidents which really demand attention. Another is Holocaust denial. When questioned about the Texas flood aid, Grok resurfaced a conspiracy theory questioning whether there were 6 million deaths at all during the Holocaust by the Nazis in World War II. He also produced some really unpleasant slurs, calling the Polish PM Tusk a ginger whore. Well, these aren't hiccups, they're systemic failures, and they've triggered a fair degree of panic. As we said, the EU is taking this extremely seriously. Turkey has banned Grok outright, reported by the Times, and XAI is actively removing posts and retraining the model. Well, of course, that likely will require a scaling up of their human resources to be able to achieve it and stay on top of that. So fixing the beast, this seems to be a key priority. Why we need AI guardrails. How do we tether this monster? How do we retrain it? Should we even try? And how do we square legislating the algorithms with libertarian arguments for unlimited freedom of speech? Well, here are some ways forward. What's called system pact tightening. That is removing the politically incorrect prompt or bias clause that has been introduced to try and give Grok a bit more personality. We need what is called more human in the loop moderation. That is post review before tweets go live, inserting real humans to provide some kind of testing and create guardrails and rules. Red teams and adversarial testing is another idea. That is where AI firms will hire hate speech experts to probe and test their systems. And finally, regulatory oversight. This is the one that AI companies really don't want governments to introduce. But the EU's Digital Services Act is setting a new standard for how this kind of legislation is framed and implemented. This stuff is not magic, but at the moment it's a kind of frantic patchwork of response, and legislators are not really ahead of the game. And Grok shows how fast we need to develop these guardrails and rules. A bot produces hate speech because our training data contains hate speech, oodles and oodles of it. So AI cannot be trained on data alone. It needs rules and moderation. Does it even need a code of morality ingrained, something like Asimov's 3 laws of robotics? But it would need to be far more complex and based on which morality, which set of rules and ideas, secular, Judaic, Christian, Buddhism, or all of them. And our networks must learn Grok's anti-Russian stance. That is great, but it can also drift into genocide denial and shameless misogyny. For a pro-Ukrainian audience, we can't just celebrate the barbs against Putin. We must also demand ethical AI that resists extremism, no matter which side it comes from. These rules and frameworks were developed over a few centuries for traditional print media. We need to go through a similar but far more extensive process for AI, but it cannot be developed over centuries. We need it in the space of not even years, but the next few months. Laissez-faire when it comes to the guardrails of AI is no longer tolerable. But this also challenges the unfettered capitalism that gave rise to the companies that own the intellectual property behind AI because they do not want to be regulated. They do not want to be limited in any way, even if there is evidence that what they're doing is causing considerable damage and harm. Will the rules win, or will the companies that own and run AI actually abolish democracy to ensure they can continue to grow unfettered?